We're going to take a look at 5 great tips for solving riddles. But first, as promised, we're going to show you the answer to the super tricky riddle from the last video. What drink is this? It looks like HIJKLMNO, not much of a drink. But another way of thinking about this is what you see here is all the letters from H to O, or H2O, which of course is water. So this drink is H2O, or water. Now on to the tips. Tip number 1, don't assume. Let's take a look at a riddle and see how this can be used. A 5-letter word contains a P and H. How can you remove 2 letters and be left with 1? Well, the assumption we're making here is that if I have a 5-letter word and I take away 2 of them, I'm left with 1 letter. But that's just not possible, and that's because we've made an assumption. The riddle doesn't ask, how can you be left with 1 letter? It just says, be left with 1. Okay, so how can I take a 5-letter word and be left with 1? O-N-E. Well, I need to start with a 5-letter word that contains the letters O, N, and E. And as the riddle tells us, it also contains P and H. So if we put that P and H right in front, we have the word phone. Take away the P and H, and we're left with 1. So remember, don't assume. Tip number 2. Numbers equals nonsense. Here's another riddle, with a couple of numbers thrown in. A ladder hangs over the side of a ship. The bottom of the ladder is 12 inches above the water. If the water rises 15 inches, how much of the ladder is underwater? This sure looks like a math problem, but again, remember, numbers equal nonsense. So how can we solve this without using any numbers at all? Well, let's think about what this might look like. If we have a boat with a couple of people in it, and a ladder hanging off the side of the boat, and all of these things are in the water, what happens when the water level goes up? Everything goes up. The boat floats, the people float, and the ladder is connected to the boat. So you see, the ladder doesn't get any wetter just because the water level goes up. You don't need to use any numbers at all to solve this riddle. Numbers equal nonsense. Tip number 3, double meanings. What coat is always wet when you put it on? Well, if we think about coats, there are jackets, there are blazers, winter coats, summer coats, fleeces, all different types of coats. But that'll get you into trouble. You need to think about another type of coat. How about a coat of paint? And that, of course, is the answer. A coat of paint is always wet when you put it on. So remember, not every word means what you think it has to mean in a riddle. There are double meanings to many words. Tip number 4. If it's too easy, it's wrong. Take a look at this riddle. Mr. and Mrs. Jones have 4 daughters. Each daughter has a brother. How many kids do Mr. and Mrs. Jones have? Let's take a look at the simple solution. Here we have 4 daughters, and let's match up each daughter with a brother. So they have a total of 8 children. Now, that sure sounds like the right answer, but it's not. It's just too easy. So let's break it apart. Again, here are the 4 daughters, but let's just give one of the daughters a brother. Okay, so we have 1 daughter with 1 brother. But it looks like that brother can also be a brother to another daughter, and another daughter, and another daughter. So we see that it only takes 1 boy to make 1 brother for 4 daughters. And that means Mr. and Mrs. Jones have a total of 5 kids and not 8 kids. Remember, if it's too easy, it's probably wrong. Tip number 5. Read the first word. You walk into a room and see a goldfish, a rabbit, a spider, and a goose. Which is the biggest animal in the room? You might be inclined to think, well, it's probably between a rabbit and a goose, and I'm not quite sure which one's bigger. But then you're not using the tip. read the first word, which in this case is you. And that's the answer. You are the biggest animal in the room. Riddles try to trip you up by adding a lot of stuff after the beginning to make you forget what you first read. Don't forget it. Make sure to read the first word. Alright, let's try a couple on our own now. Tom's father has 12 kids. Here are the names of 11 of them. Bill, Dill, Phil, Gil, Hill, Jill, Kill, Mill, Pill, Sill, Till. What's the name of the 12th kid? Here are the 5 tips listed below. Take a few moments to try and figure out which one of these tips you should use in order to solve this riddle. Have you figured it out yet? Well, let's take away the 4 that we don't need for this riddle. And we're left with number 5. Read the first word, which in this case is Tom. And that, of course, is the answer. The name of the 12th kid is Tom, not Will, as you may have initially thought. Let's take a look at one more. You are my brother, but I am not your brother. How can that be? Here are the 5 tips once again. Take a few moments and see if you can figure out which tip you should use. In this case, it's number 1. Don't assume. You're making an assumption here if you can't figure out the answer. We won't give away the answer to this one just yet. If you think you can solve it, make sure to post the answer in the comments below for others to see. Otherwise, you can wait until the next video to find out the answer to this riddle. If you're looking for more tips on solving riddles of all different types, make sure to subscribe. See you next time.